Hello, this is Strictly Money, and I'm your host, Saijal Patel. Thanks for watching. Swiss bank UBS recently named Toronto one of the world's bubbliest housing market, and that the latest price surge of another 35% since the pandemic was not sustainable. Okay, there have been warnings like this for many years, and Canadians have largely ignored them. But with interest rates on the rise and an impending recession, maybe, just maybe, this time is different. David Larock is president of Integrated Mortgage Planners, and he's back with his insights on the housing market. Hi, David. Great to have you.
Thanks, Saijal. Great to be here.
So what do you think? Is this time different?
Well, I think we should always be wary of the phrase, this time it's different. But in this case, maybe. It's really, I think there's a short-term and a long-term answer. In the short term, rates have tripled and we have record high debt levels. And when you look at the price of housing in the GTA, prices have been so high that has necessitated higher debt levels than in other parts of the country, save for maybe Vancouver. So over the short term, no question, you can't triple rates on very high debt levels and not have that impact the market. Now, the stress test will help because when rates were 1.5%, people were being qualified at 5% or 5.25%. And that was an important buffer in the market, and we're benefiting from that. And there's really no question that in the short term, buyers are looking at the market saying, my cost of borrowing has gone way up. I can only afford to buy at a lower price. But sellers are saying, I want the prices that were available in February. I'm not willing to accept a lower price at this point. So everybody's kind of in a standoff right now, and it's not entirely clear who's going to blink first. Yeah. I think we'll find out next spring who ultimately does blink. Yeah. The other side, though, of the argument is when you look at more long-term factors, we have record high levels of immigration into Canada, and about a third of the new immigrants to our country come to the GTA. And that influx of population is going to ensure that demand stays robust for housing. We have a shortage of available housing. That's been well documented. And the other thing is, if you're not going to buy a resale house, you're going to buy a new construction house, or you're going to build a new house. Development costs went up 50% a few months ago and are onerously high. So really, how can the price of housing drop by 50% if the cost to build housing is significantly higher and we have a housing shortage? So really, those are the two sides of the argument. I think over the short term, there should definitely be downward pressure on house prices. But over the longer term, when you compare the replacement cost of housing, i.e. the cost to build new housing, it's still quite high. And I think that is going to put a floor under prices. But again, I am not bullish short term, but I think long term, 10, 20 years from now, I think there's still an argument to be made that barring short-term price corrections, that the supply-demand fundamentals and the replacement cost argument are still compelling.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting that you talked about people, the sellers hanging on to higher prices, because I am noticing that. Even though there's a lot of talk about housing activity down in major cities, do you think that they're going to have to kind of cave in and that we should see some more downside for housing prices?
I think so. The other thing people have to remember is not everybody has the mortgage on their house. More than half of the properties, residential properties in Canada, don't have a mortgage on them at all. And those people are under no pressure based on what's happening with mortgage rates. Certainly, there's a subsegment of the market. People who bought a couple of years ago when rates were 1.5 are now under pressure, especially if they maxed out their borrowing capacity and prices have fallen. They might be a little underwater right now, no question. But those people just bought, and a lot of the people buying back then were of the mind they were probably buying when prices were frothy, but they were doing it long term, and they were willing to ride out a short-term change in prices if they felt like they were making a good long-term investment. So I don't think those people en masse will be overly swayed if they can continue to make their payments. And you know, there's lots of other factors to consider. In the end, we'll find out, I think, the next time a lot of inventory hits the market, who is under more pressure to adjust their positions. It'll be buyers or sellers, and then we'll know.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. We only have 15 seconds until the commercial break. Are you noticing big differences though, GTA or anywhere where it seems to be more stable?
Not yet. No, I'm noticing inventories are low and the market has certainly slowed, but I think a lot of people are taking a wait and see approach right now.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Welcome back. You know, David, right now it feels like there's this fear that if home values decline far enough, maybe even fast enough, that some people will see that the market value of their home is less than their mortgage. And I have to think that's probably for newer buyers. What are your thoughts?
Well, there's certainly, I think people should expect that prices are going to decline. The question is by how much? Are we going to get a dip or are we going to get a crash? And any homeowner who's bought recently and borrowed to a high degree certainly would be worried about being in a negative equity position where the mortgage was worth more than their house. Um, but again, we really don't know. And I think I want to be careful about sounding overconfident in my predictions because we are in volatile times and there's a lot of uncertainty in the market. I would say this historically, even in rare cases where Canadians have been underwater on their mortgages, they haven't, quote unquote, mailed in their keys, which is when they put their keys in an envelope, send them to the lender, move out, and say, here, Mr. Lender, the property's yours. It's your
Right.
problem now. Closest example we have is in Alberta in the oil price crash back in 2015, and that didn't happen. So, I mean, there's lots keeping people up at night, and I can't rule out the risk entirely, but I think it's a low probability.
Okay. I have to believe that mortgage lenders, though, are going into defense mode, given what's going on in the economy right now. So, what do home buyers need to be aware of?
Well, lenders are certainly asking more questions, but right now, for as long as appraised values hold up, lenders are still pretty confident. The test of a lender's courage is if prices drop by 10%, because then they have to lend on properties that could be worth less a month later, and their courage will be tested. But we're not there yet. I still find that lenders are quite aggressive. There's some rate specials out right now as lenders roll up to their fiscal year ends in October, October 31st, and everybody's still competing for business, especially when there's less of it out there. The competition is as aggressive as ever. But funding costs are higher for lenders. Rates have certainly gone up. And lenders are definitely making sure that borrowers are robustly tested. So probably not as many lending exceptions as maybe people were getting a year ago, but I would say lenders are still open for business.
Would you recommend people go variable now or fix?
Really depends
Interesting
on the
times.
borrower. Yeah, the challenge right now, and again, I write about this in detail in my blog posts, but basically right now, if I were in the market, I'd be deciding between a 5-year variable rate uh, or a shorter term fixed rate of 2 or 3 years. And if I did like the 5-year fixed rate, I wouldn't be getting it from a lender that charges the really hefty penalties like the major banks like to do.
Okay. David, what's your view on where rates go from here? Because there doesn't seem to be a sign of hikes pausing right now, even though we might see a recession.
Well, until we get inflation under control, rates are going to keep going up. So I think in the short term, people should expect that rates will continue to move higher. But we do have record levels of debt outstanding in the economy, both household debt and government debt. And at some point, these rate hikes are going to exert their full bite, and it takes about 2 years. So it wouldn't be until early 2024 before we really had a sense for how the BOC's rate hikes were fully impacting the market. When we get to that point, I think there's going to be a sharp slowing in the economy. I actually think we may see it in the second half of next year. And when that happens, I expect that rates will come back down, not to the levels that we saw during the pandemic, but lower than they are today. And I think if borrowers can sleep at night, I think preserving some flexibility to take advantage, either through a variable rate or a shorter term fixed rate, when that does transpire, will benefit borrowers and result in lower borrowing costs.
Yeah, it certainly will be interesting to see, right? Because one of the things that supports people being able to pay their mortgages, of course, is employment. And if we go into recession, I think there is a bit of fear that picture might change. David, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Do you think that the Bank of Canada and maybe even the Fed, do you think they're making a policy mistake?
Yes, I do. Um, I think that they left rates too low for too long, and I think they're worried that they've lost confidence that they can control rates. And I think they're determined that they cannot err on the high side again. I think all of their biases now are towards over tightening, and I think at this point, inflation is a bigger fear for them than a recession.
Yeah.
And I fully expect they will over tighten. 11 out of the last 14 tightening cycles by the Fed have led to recession. And when you
Okay.
look at the tightening cycles, the tightening cycle we're in the midst of right now, we're seeing more rapid increases and a sharper series of increases. So those things to me pretty much guarantee we're going to see a significant slowdown in the next 6 to 12 months.